everyone, and thank you for coming to our presentation of an intergenerational close-gender initiative for sustainable relationship in Japan and Costa Rica. Today, I'm so glad to have all of you with us, members of UNFPA, UNDP, the Melinda and Gates Foundation, and community-led foundations. Thank you all for coming. We will now take turn presenting ourselves to acknowledge our standpoint on this exciting initiative.
So I am Ode Moyang. As you can kind of see from my mattering map, these are the aspects of myself that are the most important to me and describe me the most. With their interconnectedness, you can tell that, for example, gender represents the fact that I am a feminist. I am a feminist and an environmentalist. I have lived in 5 different continents, which makes culture and interactions with others very important to me. I have worked for the past 8 years with women below the poverty line as an upper class woman, which means that class for me is very important. Also as a woman, as an environmentalist, and living in the 8 different continents. I have worked in slums with indigenous communities and migrants. And my primary concern with my political beliefs, as I see it, linked to all these other aspects, is the importance of voicing concerns of the marginalized populations to the people in power, which is why Mari and I are here today.
So here is my mattering map. For me, family, gender, sexual orientation, I think these 3 indicators define who I am today. I grew up in a family where I have 2 older brothers, and that's where I learned femininity. For many Japanese, especially for older generations, a sense of belonging is important, and therefore I consider other institutions such as school office, group membership, interpersonal relationship with others matter most.
So today, our innovative project will work towards self-sustainability, but first we need your financial support. Our mission is actually the mutual respect between older women and younger boys. Why? Because both in Costa Rica and Japan, we have found that they still hold an essentialist division of both genders. We believe that today the issue perpetrating this gender-based violence and lack of opportunities is the intergenerational polarization between men and women, boys and girls. Too often, young boys are taught that girls and women have no other value than housework and child rearing. The older generation frowns on the younger male generation as unproductive delinquents. We want these 2 generations working together. How? What we want to do is organize a community center in both Japan and Costa Rica. These community centers will be self-sustainable due to their recycling nature. The recyclables will be forged mostly by the young males, the young boys, but the whole structure will be run by elderly women who will also be reaching out to the larger corporations for the recycling. In the long term, we see this community center providing shelter for women, to employ these younger boys, classes and training for women who have to leave their homes and who before were only in their housework and child rearing, and they will come here to learn new skills. We will formalize recyclers. We will have classes for the elders to get them out of their homes, such as Tai Chi, to get them moving as well. We will provide, hopefully, lunches for the school children who cannot afford it. And of course, we would like to provide shelter for children and adolescents who have nowhere to go. As I said again, these community houses will be run by the older women, will be economically and socially supporting young males and the community as a whole. Now Mari will tell you a little bit about how this fits into the realities in Japan.
So this is the intergenerational close-gender sustainable relationships in Japan. as almost 90% of total population is living in urban area in Japan, I focused on Tokyo. As an example, as a background, the number of juvenile delinquency is higher than adult criminals in Japan, and that's why we think it's important to include those younger boys into our project. Gender is center of the map for both older women and boys, because as I explained to you in my individual mothering map, gender gender is center of the society in Japan, and then it's how defined who you are in the society. And then I also want to focus on age, because Japan has the highest population of older adults in the world. To give you an example, a quarter of population is age 65 or older at the moment. Average life expectancy for women is 86.3 years old. I want to highlight that lonely death is the increasing phenomenon for the older people who is dying alone and remaining undiscovered for a longer time. The proposed reason for one of the proposed reasons for the lonely death is due to lack of social connection, which is why we want to bring it to our project. Aging is also impending issue in terms of public policies and pensions and healthcare for older women. I also want to add that traditionally people used to live in multi-generational houses in Japan, but then because due to the influence by Western culture, we now tend to live by ourselves, not in the multi-generational houses. In this relation, media for younger boy is playing major role. TV programs and violent video games may be one of causes of juvenile violence. Age also matters to younger boys, as they may be seen unexperienced when they get a job. As for the classes, although Japan is one of the most developed countries, 1 in 6 children are now living in poverty. More than 500,000 single mothers live below the poverty line and earning less than 12,000 per year. So, as the key to break the poverty cycle, our project can bring those kids who are suffering from poverty or involved in a crime, and at the same time bring women in a leadership position and foster mutual respect and understanding. Since land price is pretty high in Tokyo, I would like to suggest that instead of building a new community center, we may be able to use women's shelter, because women's shelter is lacking at the moment. Women's shelter for the victim of domestic violence is lacking at the moment. There is only one public shelter in each prefecture, and NGO-led about 100 shelters are covering the rest, but they are also facing financial problem.
Thanks, Mari. So now a little bit about Costa Rica. One of the really interesting things that we discovered by working together on this project was there were actually a lot of similarities between Japan, at the center of Japan, and also urban Costa Rica, which is where it would be taking place in Costa Rica. Differently from Japan, Religion is still very important to the older generation in Costa Rica, especially the women that we would be talking about, because it is part of their group membership and routine and tradition. But just like in Japan, the older generation through the media, and especially the young males, are moving more away from the religious aspect and moving more towards Western cultures and values, which in our case is actually potentially beneficial, because that would be a way of attracting them, because what we will be also be able to provide is a job and work, and therefore money. Because especially in Costa Rica, the unemployment rate for the younger generation, for teens, is actually 3.5 times higher than the adult unemployment rate. And families, which is extremely important, especially the older generation, they do depend on the younger generation bringing in money, specifically the young boys, and so this will allow them to do so. In Costa Rica, it is also, just like Japan, a very patriarchal society, and a lot of you who live here know the term machismo here in Costa Rica. And this machismo does have a lot of cultural constraints on both women and males. I would say specifically specifically felt right now by the younger male generation that are being pushed one way. The older generation is living until 80 years old for older women. And as I said, family isn't extremely important for them, but the younger generation is moving away and more in tune with their group membership, meaning the other young boys that they are hanging out with. Costa Rica is also still, as I said, very essentialist, and they have naturalized a lot of the differences between both genders. So women still have this perceived nurturing role versus like being able to construct a professional career, which is what we are also excited to be dealing with. As I said, we will start in the urban areas of Costa Rica, where 65% of the population lives, close to large industries, for example, like Alajuela. Only 59% of all high school age males actually attend high school, so there's a lot of young boys not going to high school, and so they need a place, they need to be surrounded. As well, in Costa Rica, the percentage of the population that is between the ages of 10 to 19 years old is 20% of the total population, which means it is growing rapidly, and there's a lot of them. So the way that this program will work in Costa Rica is we will need to identify women leaders that are active in their communities. We will have to reach out to already existing recycling centers, which actually I have already been to, and a lot of them are run by an older woman, and a lot of them are run by an older woman, and the people working there collecting the recycling are already men, but they're the older generation of men. And if you speak to them a little bit, they will already tell you that in this specific structure, they already feel like a family. We will have to, of course, identify also the young boys in need of this support, and formalize them as recyclers and formalize women administratively. We want to reach out to training programs for women in difficulties. And then again, we talked about potentially in the long run having school lunches for younger children and bringing in more the even younger generation to be part of this community. We will also reach out to the industries to have them to donate also their recyclables. And then we will reach out to the government to see, because one thing that we also find was that the older generation is very involved in politics, while the younger generation, of course this one, since they would be below the age of 18, they're not yet capable to vote. So they would not be that interested in it, but it would be getting them into that. And then of course to increase the communication between older women and younger boys. So what could be better than building resistant, sustainable, community-led, gender-conscious, gender and patriarchy conscious, environmentally conscious, empowered communities? So now Mari is going to talk a little bit about the difficulties that we would actually find doing this project in Costa Rica. Or actually first, do you guys have any questions? Does everybody understand what we're trying to do? Yeah?
Okay, so in Costa Rica's case, since Ode is not from Costa Rica, we would not have done a feasible study. She is only living in Costa Rica for the past 2 years, so more studies may be needed. Ode's identity map has Ode Identity Map's individual map has a focus on environment and politics. So there is a possibility that she made Costa Rica more focused on those two areas. We are both basing success on community-driven women and poor community conscious use, but then maybe reality may be different. We also talked about how a falling can impact a community-led initiative. Also, there is an issue that growing population of teens and effects of climate change, and those issues are not included in this map.
The issues in Japan, as Mari mentioned earlier, is that the land prices are extremely high to do it in the urban environment, whereas where our population would be the most needing of this sort of organization. And so she would really have to go towards the municipalities in Tokyo and find potentially if they could be able to donate land or assistance or to go through a high school. She also mentions that Tokyo is already that there are already a lot of NGOs there that are providing shelters for women. Therefore, it would potentially be better to connect the actors versus creating something new. Also, when we were discussing how we would do this in both countries, she was very adamant about the social hierarchies that exist in Japan. So, for example, in Costa Rica, I could see a trained woman be able to go to, for example, Dos Pinos, which is like the major dairy producer here, and be able to talk to them and ask for their recycling, while Mari does not see it very feasible to have a lower class woman going into one of these corporations and asking them for their assistance. It's just not very well done. And so, which is also why we would need you to provide legitimacy for these women, because if we said that it was funded by a project from the United Nations or from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation or another foundation, Mari said that they would be seen as, having more status and therefore could potentially approach those people. Mari thinks that it is more likely, instead of having this recycle-run community center, it would be more likely to have what is actually being done right now and have kindergartens put together with retirement homes. But then the question is, this would have intergenerational components, but would it actually have a gender focus? And then another issue that we both really face is that since we are going to be doing these in patriarchal societies, how much would these patriarchal societies hinder women's self-confidence in being able to lead and run a project like this? So that is our project that we came up with together. It was a very interesting moment for the both of us, trying to figure out something that could potentially work for both countries. What we did realize is that potentially the populations that we chose to reflect were populations that we want to work with, and therefore we're describing the context that we want. So pretty much that we're like seeing what we want rather than what is actually there. But it really helped for us discussing to see if we were actually just putting something on because that's what we needed for our project, or if those were actual realities. Also, the fact that we are studying the same course, we're both masters in gender and peace building, so the effect that that also has on what we've decided to do, and that we share like a same point of view, which might make it that while we are sharing to try to construct this, we're actually not seeing different points of views because we're coming still from the same place. And we had also a lot of difficulty, and Mari can talk to this, about the interconnectedness of all of these indicators. So for example, there's, you know, family, group membership, and adherence to other institutions, and there's another one that is, intersection with other families. Do you want to talk about that, Mari? About how, of course, it depends on where our discourse is and how we use language and what all these subjects mean to each and every one of us. For example, on the personal map, the ones that are closest to me, I'm sorry you can't see, but it's like gender and class and interactions with others, cultures, political beliefs, and environment. And as I'm talking about these, you know, and Mari's like, well, what about how you're linked to your work or school? But I actually realized that all the ones that are closest, that I feel closest, more like attached to, and that describe who I am more, actually all have to do with one that I had actually put on the extreme exterior. So then it's also, you know, a quote from the professor's reading about how what we choose to see, we think it's reality, but actually it's just what we're seeing is actually like opportunity of, you know, what we could potentially be. Oh, a really important thing is also it's all of this, of course, is based on assumptions that through just the younger boys being around older women, that somehow they would gain a female perspective and not just keep their, you know, taught male perspective and power and dominance. So yeah. Any questions?